Het is 29 oktober 2020, het is weer Thoughtful Thursday en vandaag hebben we een gast uit Duitsland, Max Wittrock. Max, welcome to our weekly Thoughtful Thursday, and I'm very pleased to see you again.
Thanks, same here.
It's a while since we have seen each other.
That's true.
What we always do is that we will start with your news and my news of this week. But before doing that, I would like to introduce you. We met each other several years ago in New York, times when it still was possible to travel. And when we met each other, it was at the National Retail Federation, where you did a presentation on, at that time, My Muesli. You are a food entrepreneur, a startup entrepreneur, and we would like to talk about food retailing, and especially also on e-commerce. But before doing that, what's your news of the day?
On news of the day, I mean, in terms of business news, I'm afraid I don't have that many major updates. As I'm in Germany, I've been really following the Corona updates as they all kind of affect our businesses. I think everyone who listens to this can relate. So yeah, that's really what caught my attention the last hours, actually.
The same at my end. So the news of the day, so where we had weeks and months that we thought we were a little bit released. Currently it's COVID-19, Corona, that's the only thing that's dominating the marketplace. And I guess for you it's more or less the same as it is at our end, that we are getting close to more or less a full lockdown again. And which feels like painful, especially for retail, because if you're looking at retailers, the best is still to come for the year, and if that's in a lockdown situation, it will be extremely hard.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, if you're Dutch, chances are high that you've never heard my name before, not in a business context or in any context, but just to everyone who never met me before. My startup career, so to say, started right after law school, because I realized that I wouldn't be that good of a lawyer. I studied a lot, but I still had bad grades. That's a very bad combination. But luckily, I've met two wonderful co-founders, and together we founded a multi-channel business called My Muesli. It's also available in the Netherlands. You can custom mix your muesli, and I stepped down as co-CEO at the end of 2019 because I wanted to focus on smaller businesses. Not because it's not exciting anymore, but rather because like my two co-founders are really good at like running like with a big vision, and I'm more the do the nitty-gritty stuff kind of guy. That's what I love. And yeah, and of course, like for me, I see e-commerce like has been my primary focus of business for the last 12, 13, 14 years. And I think that for us, it was really good to see that, or for us, it was really good to know that we have like this large e-commerce business. Like e-commerce is still like the major part of our muesli business. And thus, I think that's business-wise, that's really good in Corona times. But the thing is that I'm not working with the company anymore, so I don't want to speak for the company. My two co-founders should do that. But like from looking at e-commerce and in general, I don't know what you think, but I mean, I think we can all agree. We know that from data that e-commerce has had like a large push during the last months.
Especially if you're looking at food, because in non-food, e-commerce was already quite big, and in food, it always was like the stepchild in the business model. So they were not really. So they did it because they had to do it, but never did it because they thought they could build a business upon it. And that's, I think, currently changing, because we can see many people are moving towards e-commerce in food. And I believe that's also the same in Germany. I think that's also one of the reasons that Edeka really made a major investment in Picnic, the Dutch startup that 5 years ago started with their online only business.
Yeah, I think you've made a good point. I think when you look at the German landscape as a whole, like I always like jokingly said there are two things that changed dramatically in the last days, and that's how people view home office, and that's how people view food e-commerce. Because like many years ago, like the only thing that Germans really wanted to order food-wise online were like wine and maybe some specialties and
some pizzas
and some pizzas, of course, like home delivery from restaurants. And suddenly, yes, we see that of course there's a huge impact from the Corona pandemic to food e-commerce. I'm always very hesitant in the when it comes to Corona to say this is a good thing, because I really can't say that there's anything good about a virus like that. But in terms of like impact it had, it was very strong. And I think the question I ask myself is like, I think home office is here to stay, or say like flexible, how flexible we are about workspaces. But I'm really curious to see what lasting impact it will have on food e-commerce in Germany, because I think it will have a lasting impact, but for me it's too early to say. Like if the growth rates will continue, I'm sure it's going to plateau at some point. But yeah, it's really.
Yeah, but if you're looking at it, we are getting into new habits. So there are new ways that so you're saying the home office is here to stay. Some people even say home office is the new HQ. Also it has some disadvantages, real disadvantages, because I believe where work-life balance is really killed by working at home.
Yeah, I saw a cartoon.
There's never a difference anymore. There's no work and no life. Everything is blending.
No, that's true. Like I saw a cartoon in the New Yorker the other day. There was a guy sitting at his, I don't know, kitchen table, and it said like, he said to his wife, I think, I don't remember, do I live at work or do I work at home? So, and I think that described it quite good. And yeah, with food e-commerce, I think what it did though was like, it pushed a lot of businesses and it pushed a lot of people into thinking about digital commerce in an accelerated way, so to say. Like, and that I think will have a lasting impact on the German ecosystem, because if you look at what has happened with food e-commerce, and especially like along the value chain, if we start like really in the beginning, like food, like real estate is like such a huge market, but it was crazy for me that a lot of the businesses were just focused on like this small niche called the product. Like people were making new muesli bars and new wine and new whatever, but like no one really tackled the other things. And then we saw things like Delivery Hero that really went along the value chain and had tremendous impact. And I'm really curious to see like how this whole value chain will kind of develop over the next months.
For instance, if you're looking at Edeka, that they ever would take a major stake in a small Dutch startup to run e-com. You know, that if you would have asked me November last year, I would have said, no, they won't do it. Yeah, very traditional company.
For me, I'm no analyst whatsoever. You know, there are people who are way more qualified to talk about these things, but when it comes to investments, but I think for me it's quite comparable to what happened in the automotive sector when, for example, Daimler started investing into smaller startups when they realized that it was smarter to build an ecosystem around mobility. And I think that the big retailers, not only in Germany, realize that it's the same thing for them. It's not only about selling food to people, it's about really building an ecosystem, that where they're more flexible to decide what future areas of business what roads they're going to go down to. And I think, like, looking at a pandemic like this, I think it also makes you more resilient to crisis, to like developments when you. But as you said, like, yeah,
I had yesterday a talk on resilient retailing, and my statement at the event was that we have currently 4 E's for food retailing. One is experience, one is about efficiency, one is about environment, and one is when you're looking at it, so it's the ecosystem. And then if you're looking at the experience, I believe everybody now has reached to the point that experience, it's not a real need.
It's funny because, when we met for the first time, we talked about that, because I think back in 2013 and 14, experience was the buzzword in retailing, and everyone said experience is the new thing. And I remember we walked like together, we've seen a lot of stores, we've been in different countries visiting stores, and I think we can agree on the fact that you don't want to feel like a superhero that enters a store and you have to fight your way to the counter, because that would be an experience, but you just want to buy a shoe. And I would definitely agree. The thing is, though, I think experience is still, also in terms of e-commerce, is still a very valid part, but it has to be seen differently. It's not, for me, it's not experience as an adventure, is experience as in really caring about the consumer. And I think,
and that's the statement I made yesterday. It's no longer experience in the physical environment, but it's experience as digital engagement. Yeah, because I believe we have to exchange physical experiences, because nobody wants to stay long at a certain location now for shopping, and a big part of the shopping is already done in advance. So it's more about digital engagement than on physical experience.
And I think that even if there is no physical experience, like even if it's an online only journey, Tim Ferriss once said in his podcast, like, his advice to retailers, to online retailers that want to change one thing, he said, have you ever looked at your order confirmation email and all these other emails? And I think it's such a simple but striking example, like how many retailers, online retailers, still kind of neglect this whole chain of like order confirmation emails and all these touch points with the consumer. And I think that's what really experience is about. It's not just about beautiful unboxing. It's not just about a good website. It's about everything that happens. And I think we've now officially entered the age where you can still be the cheapest, then you don't have to care about experience at all. But for everyone else, I think it's like, really, please do your homework, because I think it's important. Like, and we all know how difficult that is. It's challenging.
And that's also where we get to the point of ecosystem, that we have to make the journey as smooth as possible. Every time where we are in touch with the customer, that they always have the same feeling, the same. That they are rewarded.
Yeah, and I think ecosystem is a good example of another buzzword, as you know, that is used quite often in our industry, because I use it a lot, but like it sometimes, like this guy the other day, he told me like, okay, so you're all talking about ecosystem. What does ecosystem really mean? I'm like, well, and I prepared this long answer, and I was like, yeah, but you're right. It's a difficult word, but when you look at, I think, but as we all know, Amazon, for example, is a very good example for an ecosystem in terms of how they differentiate their businesses, like all the stuff they're doing. But I think even the website, it's like where you have basically two functions. Even if you're just buying a product, it's a search engine, and it's also like really a place to buy stuff, and that alone is like an ecosystem.
But if you're looking at food retailing, then I believe they have a bigger chance. So retail chains that also have e-com, they have a bigger chance of building the ecosystem, because if you're already thinking of starting, what will we have for dinner tonight, which is the most posed question across Europe, I guess, or maybe in the world. So that's your starting point. So that's where recipes kick in, where you can have the videos, where if you take the recipe, you can put everything into your basket. You can either buy it online or you can buy it in store. And as soon as you have everything at home, you go back to the ecosystem again, because you need the recipe again, because you have to prepare the meal. So I think they have a big advantage towards other retailers.
I think you're right. But like what keeps me awake sometimes is that I think, especially in the kitchen, like the gateway will change. I'm a strong believer that voice as an interface system will take over the kitchen in the next years. And the problem, or the kind of challenge with that, from my opinion, I would love to hear your opinion on this, is that if I'm in the kitchen and I'm like, Alexa, I want to cook potatoes tonight, like what it's the search, the voice search changes everything, because there's not room for 20 results. There's only room for one result, like for one recipe and for one retailer that's going to offer this. And I think that's like a major challenge. Is that something you think about a lot, like interface?
Yeah, and that's also where I believe that the food retailer, they not only have to offer that I can buy online and offline, but also that I have the recipes. But the voice interaction, I really believe that's necessary. And also thinking of it. So I had last night I had a WhatsApp conversation with a large retailer in the Netherlands, and I said, well, your application is really cool. The only thing I'm missing is the voice interaction in the app for the recipe. Because if I'm cooking, I can't push the buttons on my cell phone. It should start talking to me what I have to do.
Yeah. And that, I think, the challenge is quite comparable. I think if you look back 10 to 15 years, when people were like, should we invest in e-commerce? Should we invest in building a digital ecosystem, or should we build even nicer stores and renovate our flagship stores if we can't do both? And now it's like, I think the challenge is, do I try to be the number one whatever thing that Alexa or Google Assistant will recommend when you ask for something? Do I do like voice search engine optimization, so to say? Or, as you said, like, do I focus on my own digital ecosystem, and do I really try to work on that application? And I think the answer is, at the moment, you have to do, like, actually you have to do all of it. Like, you either have to do a brave gut decision and go in one direction, or you have to be open for like all kinds of things. And it's tough. It's really I think there are tons of like possibilities out there, but it's also quite a challenging time technologically for retailers.
If you're looking at brands, you have been working, you created with your co-founders your own brand. But if we are looking at brands, for them it's quite challenging currently, because if we are not allowed to go too often to stores, that's the only place where they can put their products in my face. And now they have to rely on search engines. They are not that good themselves at direct-to-consumer retailing. So what's the challenge? So it seems that brands are becoming more important if we are in a crisis. So people want something they can trust. But at the same time, the windows towards those brands, they are closed.
Super difficult, because you're right. I think that, like, when kind of throughout my marketing career, in the beginning, there was still like so much was data driven, and we were the ones that said, you forget billboards and all that. We don't need that. It's just going to be data. Suddenly, like, organic reach declines on all platforms, and everyone goes and says, well, this is the time of the upper funnel. It's branding again. And you see all these startups doing like billboards and all these things that used to be done in the 70s and 80s when positioning was invented. And I think that's, as you said, and for me, the big challenge is like the typical upper funnel, like awareness of the consumer. This is my brand is done in stores, is done on streets, is done when people commute, and all this goes away. And suddenly, yeah, it's really or like people are way more at the moment, for example, like not out on the streets anymore. Like, what do you do? And I think I talked to one of the online marketeers at my Muesli about it, and he said, like, who's doing a lot of Facebook advertising. So Facebook is still a very valid platform, I would say, for most startups. And what he said, and I think that was quite interesting in terms of the profile of a marketing manager. In the beginning, as I said, you were looking for people that were really great in Excel and were really just doing data. And now you have to have this branding, this creative part, because ads, posts, sponsored stuff will only be relevant if you do smart decision making, but also if you have like engaging content, if you're creative. And so I think, to come back to your question, like, how do brands kind of survive? They have to be more creative than ever. And technology amplifies and honors creativity. Like, if you do something really creative on social media, then the algorithm knows that, wow, this is something that people engage with, and will push it even further.
But how have those? What's the next step for those big brands? Because they have to fight for margin with the mass retailers.
I think
they don't have the direct connection with the consumer because they never had to create it, and now they're getting there. They have to run their own businesses, and they have to start their direct to consumer channel.
And I think there are two challenges. The first one is that, like, 10, 20 years ago, the food consumer was like, is there maybe a pricier or a cheaper alternative available? Now the consumer goes, is there an organic, non-dairy, vegetarian, vegan, sourceable, traceable, whatever? So, and that's basically every consumer. So the consumer, and then you have the major brands. If you look at McDonald's, for example, I think, like, it used to be like the big brands are doing everything wrong, the startups are doing everything right. But if you look at McDonald's, I think they're a great example on Instagram. Like, if you haven't been following them, they have been doing corporations. They have been doing stuff together with musicians, with Travis Scott, for example, and a rapper, and they sold, for example, a chicken McNugget pillow, and everything was sold out instantly. Their Instagram game is so, like, it's so urban, it's so up to date, and so you have difficult consumers. Big brands, you used to be like, oh, they can't do anything. They're so awesome now at social media. So what do you do? And I think there are only like two ways out of this. Like, I think it's more important than ever to realize that you can't please everyone. I think it's really about focusing. Like, which consumer do I want to target? Like, and the second thing is, I think that in terms of branding, you also have to focus, like, take one or two channels or take one or two areas of expertise and really focus on those, because it's really a bad idea to be average on 20 channels, rather be awesome in one or two. I think that's kind of my marketing lesson from the last months.
Yeah. And if you're looking at big brands like, for instance, Nestle or Mars or Unilever, Procter & Gamble, or Heinz, should they also try to work their way around on platforms, so that they should play around with it, learn more about it, or should they stay away from that?
I think, speaking in general about multi-brand companies, I think for them it's quite challenging, and I think there is no like one size fits all approach if you have like 50, 100, 200 or more brands in your portfolio. And that's why it's easier for McDonald's, of course, because they like it's never easy, but like they have a simpler value proposition, because it's like restaurants and food, and so but I think that like I think they have to start somewhere, and work their way through it. But then we come back to the eternal question. Like, it used to be sales versus marketing, like who's the king or the queen, and now I think it's business development and marketing. Like, what do we do? Do we buy a lot of startups, or do we expand? And it's tough. It's tough to be to be a CEO these days, I think, because you will most definitely make more mistakes than in the past, and these mistakes will be much more transparent, and these mistakes will be much more visible to the general public. But I think marketing, I don't want to speak in buzzwords, but I think, as you kind of also said, I think the brands are really back. And the challenge is just to get it out to the consumer. And I think what McDonald's has also shown is that testimonial marketing, we're all speaking about influencer marketing since 5, 6, 7 years, but I think we've only kind of scratched the surface. I think that it's more important than ever if it's not a must do, but it's a very, very valid channel. Because just so we all kind of think about it again, in the 80s and 90s, these celebrities, they didn't have their own kind of channels. Like, you had German tennis player Boris Becker on a billboard, but he didn't have an Instagram account with millions of followers, and that changed. And of course, we all know that, but I think this change is really tremendous. That someone like Travis Scott is an advertorial, or is a testimonial for McDonald's, and does all these things, and they really understand how he talks to his fans. And if you don't follow McDonald's on Instagram, you should do it, because it's really worth watching, I think.
And if you're looking at, so we have our platform here, where the largest one is Amazon in Europe. But if you're thinking of going, for instance, to China, because everything is opening up a little bit more there, Alibaba or Tmall or JD, those are opportunities for Western brands currently, because are you a little bit reluctant on that as well?
No, the thing is with China, like, as you know, like when there were still retail conferences, like, every good retail speaker that wanted to deliver an engaging keynote had to show China examples, and had to and I remember, like, I was watching like all these keynotes, and I said, like, I have to do the same thing. And I Googled what JD is doing in terms of convenience markets. I think it was 1 or 2 years ago. And then and they said that they wanted to open these smaller supermarkets, what Alibaba is doing as well, on a regular basis. And they said they want to open 1,000. So I said, like, 1,000 in a month. So they were talking about 1,000 a day. And and I think, if you're talking about opportunities in China, we always have to see, like, we're never, like, this is just a level of speed, and I've never really looked into, like, what does supermarket actually mean? Does it just mean hooking up a convenience store to their system or whatever? But let's say they open, like, even 5 a week. That's also a lot for a European, for our understanding of doing business. So I think, yes, there are tremendous chances all across the world, but it depends on really what we're doing. And I think that whereas in Europe we still have the chance to create direct-to-consumer businesses, to create our own ecosystems, to really have a following of 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 or more customers. When you look at markets like China for European brands, it's not, you can serve their ecosystems and you can sell through Taobao, whatever, but you will not, like, it's a different way of doing business. It's old schooler in terms of, like, you're just selling stuff to people. And I think that's why I'm more, but in the businesses I would like to pursue and I'm pursuing, it's what I really strongly believe in is building direct-to-consumer ecosystems right here. That's something where my passion lies, but I'm no China expert.
Well, one of the things that was also at the core of my muesli, and I believe also at the core of one of your beliefs, is that customization, at the time when you started, you felt it was extremely important. Is it still important today or not?
I think it. So one of the things we would write on a wall at My Muesli is like, people love customization, but they hate to customize. And I think that's quite important, because like we all love the idea of having like a custom built thing for us, but no one wants to configure everything in his life through a configurator. And I think that's why I think it's still, for a business like My Muesli, for example, where it's really part of the DNA, it will always be like really, really important. And My Muesli, my co-founders took it one step further by, for example, by offering personalized muesli through DNA. Like you could, through a DNA sample, you would look at what your kind of looking for the English word in German, it's Stoffwechsel, like what your how your body processes food, like slowly. Yeah. And then according to that, you would get, together with a partner, of course, like they didn't set up their own DNA lab, but you would get a muesli recommendation. And I think that's a very good point for how cool customization can be and how future-driven customization can be. But we have to get, like same with voice interface and like keyboards, we have to get out of our head that customization means that people sit in front of a computer and say, this is Frank's super belt. Customization can, but in clothes, I think it's the same thing. Like when
a couple of weeks ago, we had the owner of Tony Chocolonely, the chocolate brand. You are familiar with it.
Sure.
They have their own chocolate production site at a store, and then he told me that 60% of all bars that people are creating themselves are caramel sea salt, which is their most sold bar anyhow. So that's also interesting. So people want to create their own bar, but then 60% of all bars that are made is the most sold bar. Was that also something you experienced when people were ordering muesli?
Of course, like we thought that if everyone would just order mango muesli, you know, there wouldn't be a necessity to offer like product customization. But my co-founder Hubertus, in a very early data sample, he looked at 100,000 approximately orders, and he realized, and fans of Douglas Adams and The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy knew this answer all along, but he realized that only 42 of the mueslis were identical. So if you ever read the book The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, that's where the supercomputer predicts that 42 is the answer to everything. So we knew it all along. And so we really saw that there was like a need for mass customization within the muesli space. And maybe that's because muesli is just different than chocolate, because it has like a, but this is just speculating, it has like a more nutritious value to a lot of people. It's like when you prepare for a marathon, you might eat it and stuff like that. But what was really interesting to me is that how cool, like one of the last projects I did at My Muesli I was involved in was customization of packaging. And I think that's also like people now can customize the whole tube. It's not just a label. It really looks like offset printing, and you can put Frank's Muesli on the front. And I think, the technology makes it so marvelously easy. It's never easy, but it makes it look easy how consumers can interact and how consumers can customize products. And I think that this is still like a very, very valid option. But again, like we as online marketeers, we always say, test, and then you will know. And the same goes for customization. But the problem is, if we look at the lean startup method, it would always be like test, and then adapt, test, pivot, adapt. But what companies do is they think about a customization project, they work on it for 2 years, they spend 3 million, and then they can't adapt because they say, no, this is not how we planned it. But this is not how you can do it. But I know how challenging it is.
Is that also, if we are talking about the agility that startups have, so that they also accept that if they pilot something and if it's not working, they get rid of it, whereas big companies only invest more because they know that they can fix it. and they are working for 2 years trying to fix all the bugs, whereas at the end they get to the conclusion nobody was waiting for this invention.
So just to clarify, I think there are, like, so to say, stupid startups and also stupid big companies. They're very smart large companies and very smart startups. So I think it happens on both sides of the spectrum. Okay. But yes, I think that one of the like pioneers of like this lean startup method, if you've never heard of it, it's like one of the pillars that like modern startup organization is built on. It basically says like, get customer feedback, adapt, get customer feedback, adapt. And it's customer centric. And Steve Blank, one of the early like Silicon Valley writers on tech, he pioneered that approach. And I think like if I sum it up correctly, like the most dangerous thing that lots of large companies but also startups do is like they think of something, they lock themselves in a room for 2 years, they never get any outside feedback, and then they go out with it. But the funny thing is, in some industries, let's say fashion, that is it's very important that the creative director that she or he like does that he like has his vision, that he doesn't share it with too many people, and that he just makes a bold statement. And that does work for brands. If you look at like Virgil Abloh, that you might know from Louis Vuitton, who started this fashion brand Off-White that is still very popular on Instagram, for example. Like if it wouldn't be for him, like data won't tell him what his shoes have to look like. And I think that is the problem, because I think product development is very binary these days. It's either like really customer centric, or it's either really, really like, if Kim Kardashian comes up with a new product, she's not going to ask 1,000 people if they like it. But I think that the middle ground, like that's where it kind of gets difficult. Like asking for some advice, doing maybe one little survey, and I think that's what we should get rid of. It's either be bold or be customer centric.
Yeah. And if we are talking about, you made already a comment on it earlier in this conversation on bio or vegan or vegetarian. How important are those trends within the food industry? Or is it becoming the new normal that we are more environmental cautious for everything we're buying?
I think what took me some time to realize is that I think that for every marketeer, for everyone running, starting, or developing a company, I think we are creating a desire to be really perfect. Like we don't want to show any more vulnerabilities within our company, within our ecosystem, because it's just like consumers are really, really harsh on us these days, especially German consumers. But I think and like a few months, years earlier, I would have said, yes, it's becoming the new normal. Like you have to be perfect at everything. But I think that the real answer is like, you can't be perfect at everything. There is like, you will have to focus. So I will say, yes, I would say that brands are more political, companies are more political, and they have to have values, and they have to adhere to these values. Tony Chocolonely is about slavery-free chocolate, okay, but they can't be about everything else, you know. And so same with my muesli. My muesli is about variety. It's about organic. It's about some other things, but it can't be about everything.
Have you seen that they also took up in the US that so they don't tell you who you should give your vote these days, but at least there are people encouraging people going to vote. Could you ever think of that, if you would be in charge of a brand, that you would encourage people to go voting in another country?
Yeah, my co-founder did that. He encouraged people to take on I think it was Facebook. We were, so I hope I get the story right, but basically my muesli was advocating for Europe, like and advocating for people to go to vote for the European Parliament. And I think I don't think that that every brand, it's difficult to say like what is political, like I don't want to get into like different word definitions, but if you take it bottom up, I think brands have to have values these days, and I think it's really, really difficult not to be political, because a lot of things that you do, that you say, that you do as a brand, they just are political if you want it or not.
Yeah. And if we are talking about companies having values, should companies also create impact so that where you can make the difference, that you're trying to make the difference?
Let me put it differently. I think that impact, I think like a thing that a lot of companies said for many, many years, and for example in the German landscape was like, but we're creating jobs, and I think that is not enough anymore. And I think, yes, I think you should strive for impact at some level, be it in sustainability, be it socially, or be it just by donating things, and not having, and that is, of course, we all know. I think that if you want to attract like the future generation and people and the great talent, there has to be a purpose that is larger than just selling stuff.
Do you believe that COVID is excelling is it driving these trends or not?
I don't know. But if I can only speak for myself, like it has made me think more about my values and about what's important in life, to put it very broadly. And I would assume that a lot of people have had the same train of thought. So it might have an impact, but
if I'm looking, if I'm making it very small, but also that's only for me and my family. But what we saw is that since you're more together with your family at home, you get more thoughts on what you're consuming, what's important in life, and also with the discussions with the kids. My kids are a little bit older than your kids. I understand that, but also in your conversation. So how we can make the difference. And my oldest, she's 13, and she said, well, if we will not have meat 2 days a week and everybody else is doing the same, we can make a huge difference. And she is a meat lover, but you can really create a difference.
Yeah, sure. And for me, like, if we take all that we've said in the last 45 minutes, I think, like we've said, marketing is getting more difficult because it's like, so it's, as a brand, it's more difficult because it's not about selling stuff. It's, people will also look at your ingredient list in food, for example, and say, why do you use ingredient B? And I think the question for me is, does that really mean that as a marketeer for brands, is really everything getting more difficult? Or does that also mean that there are just so many new opportunities to market your brand, to position yourself, and does it create new opportunities? And I think I'm on, if I would have to choose A or B, I'm on that train, you know. I'm like, this is, I think it's really challenging. It's really challenging because, like, nothing, no stone gets unturned, you know. If you have like if a brand does something, you know, they and put it on Instagram, they can't expect people not to comment, you know. The stone will get turned. But I think that we live in an age of like where the opportunities kind of outweigh the difficulties. Is that the correct English for me? But you know what I'm saying. And so, yeah. And so I have a positive outlook on the future.
So when will be our next meeting at the Dinosaur in Haarlem?
Yeah, that's a good question, isn't it? So it's a family restaurant that Frank and I went to in New York. And this is really, I don't know about everyone listening, but this seems really far away, and this is just, and this is like the something I still can't imagine, like when will we get back to normal? Will we ever get back to something called normal? How will life change? But I hope that we at least we won't wait that long for our next video conference.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. And what I really appreciate is that we still have our memories. So, and that's also the best that I recall from our trip to Haarlem was when we left there, that a policeman came up to us and said, "Well, what do you want to do?" And then we wanted to take the subway back, and they said, "No, you're getting in a cab." So that was probably a lifesaver. And
I think. At least we looked like people who wouldn't find their way back, because I was like constantly checking the map, and like in a movie you would cast me with someone like wearing like a typical fisherman hat and being like, where are we? These buildings are so large. Yeah, but it's good to have memories, that's for sure. And yeah, and since we've been to New York, like when I went to the I've been to New York for the last time this January, and I went to the Javits Center where the retail expo was held, and it's incredible because like if everyone who's familiar with that area, it's now called Hudson Yards. It's like one of the
it's beautiful. I was there in January as well. Yeah.
And it's like one of the largest, I think, real estate development projects in the US, probably, like in terms of like net worth of the whole property. And this is going to change so dramatically. Like, how are these offices all going to be used in the next years? Yeah. And I think, but yeah, we as retailers, we have to be like way more resilient probably and way more creative than we had to be in the past. But I think that's a thing, like all generations say, like it used to be so much easier in the past and now it's getting more difficult. So that's why I would rather.
It's good that there's also a next generation arriving. Yeah. Thank you so much. And talking about the next generation, next week we will have a session with Sarah Dol, who is a Dutch TikTok influencer, and Sam Kroon, who is a social media producer, two very young people in their 18s and early 20s. And so that's next week. We will have a great talk where we can learn from the next generation. Thank you so much for being with us, Max. And I really hope that we can see each other not too long distance, also physically again, but we will meet up again digitally. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.